The situation in the South China Sea continues to deteriorate, military tensions are rising, Southeast Asian states are losing space to exercise their powers, fisheries are nearing collapse and China is aiming for regional and global leadership. Weakening. Faced with regular pressure, China's neighbors are becoming more and more disillusioned about their long-term intentions and, along with international partners, are reinforcing their objections to Beijing's claims. China significantly increased its Coast Guard patrols and military exercises in disputed waters from 2020, and dangerous harassment of Southeast Asian oil and gas operations by Chinese law enforcement and counter-marine surveys has become the new normal. Then in January 2021, Beijing passed a law to strengthen the authority of China's Coast Guard, CCG, to enforce maritime claims, if necessary, by force. The law may be vague, but its strict language and wide scope have raised concerns. In March, the Philippines reported more than 220 Chinese maritime militia ships gathering at Whitsun Reef on the disputed Union Banks. The Philippine Coast Guard conducted several patrols on the reef and the government released photos and videos of the militia flotilla. Vietnam soon followed suit. The embarrassment and diplomatic tension caught Beijing's attention, and it temporarily dispersed the fleet to other nearby reefs. But the militia boats returned and by October their numbers had swelled to close to 200. The oil and gas standoff that has been regular since 2019 continues. In June 2021, CCG ships began patrolling around Malaysian drilling operations in the Kasawari gas field off Sarawak, targeting offshore supply ships. Chinese military planes simultaneously patrolled near Malaysian airspace, prompting Kuala Lumpur to scramble jets and issue diplomatic protests. In September, China appeared to retaliate against a drilling operation by conducting an oceanographic survey on the continental shelf of Malaysia. In July, China and Indonesia became involved in their first real dispute over hydrocarbons, when an Indonesian licensed rig began drilling 2 evaluation wells in the country's tuna block on the southern shore of the South China Sea. The CCG ships patrolled around the rig for the next 4 months. China also deployed a survey ship with a CCG escort to conduct an oceanographic survey of Indonesia's continental shelf, carefully tracing the edge of China's 9-line as Indonesian Navy ships used it. Was shaded. A dangerous incident occurred in November when China mounted high-pressure water cannons on a civilian ship resupplying Philippine troops on the Second Thomas Shoal, Manila, and the outcry from US and European officials was intense. China did not interfere with the second supply attempt again a week later. This happened while candidates were being finalized for the 2022 Philippine presidential elections. Predictably, at the most hasty promise to tough stance on China. This steady stream of bad behavior is propelling the sector. For the first time since 2016, a majority of Southeast Asian contenders and a group of international partners agree that China's behavior is destabilizing and are expressing those concerns. They are also open to greater cooperation to strengthen their position and push back. Read also, from Potgett to 2024 rumors, Kamala Harris' first year as vice president was unique. This change is most pronounced in the Philippines. In July, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte decided to repeal the U.S.-Philippines Visiting Forces Agreement. The two countries later agreed to develop a bilateral maritime infrastructure and restart construction projects under the 2014 Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, which would allow the U.S. to access and upgrade select Philippine military bases. In November, they held their first bilateral strategic dialogue in 2 years and announced plans to develop bilateral defense guidelines and conclude the General Security of Military Information Agreement. The Philippines has also increased patrols in the South China Sea and intends to deploy Coast Guard ships to the two island in Spratly. The most important question for the South China Sea in 2022 is whether Philippine foreign policy changes will continue beyond the mid-year presidential transition. The U.S. and the Philippine defense establishment will try to lock in the gains of the recent alliance, as the United States is already rapidly spreading construction funding for EDCA sites. Further high-level visits are likely as Washington seeks to prove it is serious about building a stronger and more equitable coalition. Malaysia is also hardening its resolve after Chinese pressure and remains committed to stick with its offshore energy plans despite mounting pressure from Beijing. Foreign Minister Saifuddin Abdullah acknowledged that Malaysia expects China's persecution to continue as long as the operation in Kasawari continues, but is determined to persevere. In Indonesia, the Maritime Safety Agency declared the completion of the tuna block drilling a victory over China. Agency Chief Ang Kurnia has invited counterparts from Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore and Vietnam to meet in Indonesia to share notes on how to respond to Chinese persecution. It's not hard to imagine other meetings between Southeast Asian contenders seeking common causes in the coming year. Such a small effort outside the ASEAN umbrella has not happened since 2015, when the foreign ministers of Malaysia, the Philippines and Vietnam held 2 meetings over the South China Sea. Then, as now, Southeast Asian contenders were concerned about China and disillusioned with the stalled China-ASEAN Code of Conduct. Philippine Foreign Affairs Secretary Todoro Locsin recently summed up the current mood, saying the talks have gone nowhere. This is not going to change in 2022. Instead, China's strategy will continue to steer claimants toward hedging behavior, and in some cases alignment with the United States and other external powers, that Beijing seeks to prevent. Gregory Beepling is a senior fellow for Southeast Asia and director of the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, Washington, D.C.